Hello, good afternoon. It is Thursday and it is the 10th of March. I've had a little break and I am continuing now. I have to find the end of where I stopped with Lydia, which is the story about reincarnation. More than one reincarnation. We just had a second birth, Milton, and this second book, which is the follow-on of Bliss After Life, which I started to write in 2006 and finished in 2017. Whenever I felt like it, I wrote it. It was a bit of a Mills and Boon sci-fi saga, I used to call it. Anyway, I continued writing Lydia. I think I must have started it early 2018. And I've been writing on and off. And we are now at chapter 69. And it is entitled Holly and Chris Meet Milton, which is their new grandson. After everyone had been informed of the safe new arrival, Holly wanted to see her son and persuaded Chris to drive up the next day already. They were spending Christmas in London anyway, and instead of next week, decided to drive up already for the weekend. She had been on the phone with Susan for over an hour and could not wait to see her grandson. It reminded her of Lydia's birth last March. They had driven up after the news and Susan had been all over the place with excitement. Holly was looking forward to seeing Lydia's progress. She was trying to walk already. Their little Milton was 7 pounds, same weight as Tony had been, and Milton was born at home like his dad. Holly was smiling. She was packing their bags for the week ahead. Chris was out with Frida. They would set off as soon as he was back. Holly was glad she had bought all the presents already. The equinox had now passed and Milton really did appear as scheduled at the beginning of winter, 21st December 2012, and at 22 minutes past 10. Holly was shaking her head. She heard Chris come in and Frida's pitter-patter in the hall. Hello, Chris. You know what? Milton was born at 22 minutes past 12. On the 22 minutes past 10, on the 21st of the 12th, in 2012. Isn't that amazing? All 2s and 1s. She had written it down and it looked like a code to her. You're right. It doesn't look like a binary code. They were laughing and Chris took Holly into his arms. Imagine, we're grandparents. Hi, Omi Holly. Hi, Opie Chris. She was laughing. It sounded funny. She looked at him. He had put his glasses on to read the numbers, and she said that he looked the perfect grandpa. Or Opie. If I said you looked like the perfect Omi, would that be a compliment? Chris had to giggle. Holly was already dressed to go and looked lovely in her tight trousers and roller neck bright red sweater. To him, she didn't look grandmotherly, but then what does that mean nowadays? I'd take it as a compliment. Oh, I'm so excited to see him. Susan said he was very fair and quite long. Lydia's early baby grows were too short for him. Holly was laughing. She had a bag of lovely baby outfits for Milton. It had been such pleasure to buy for her grandson, and she was ready to pack all into the car and be off. Chapter 70. Barry arranges a visit. Susan had been on the phone with their cousin Barry for over 2 hours. It was Sunday morning and she was at her own place. Barry wanted to know everything about Milton and Lydia, and they decided that it would be great if Barry could come with her 2 daughters Petra and Eleanor to visit. They had met Faye last year and no one had expected her to still be there. Lydia was now 9 months old. All summer a visit had been promised, but it had never worked out. Now there were 2 new babies and their family extended. Barry remembered Pete from old, and she knew her Eleanor had had a crush on him when they had spent some summers and holidays at Susan's. It was agreed that they'd look at flights for January in the new year. Maybe there were some deals going. You have to stop calling it the refuge. Barry had been adamant about that. Susan had agreed with her. It had become like a name and had been causing confusion with outsiders. Barry suggested they call it the Big House. In German, they had always referred to it as das Heim, a German word for home, but more a home for orphans, or at least in general usage, and that Heim could stay. But refuge? And it was a big house. Susan tended to agree with her. Leni mentioned her Canadian friends had wondered about that, and maybe this was the last year that the big house would be called Refuge. David had gone to the cottage. He would spend Christmas with all of them at the big house. Susan had told him about the conversation, and he couldn't agree more. He was hoping that his daughter Maisie and partner would come and visit over the festive period. Maisie was also pregnant, and it would be quite a mixed crowd on Christmas Day, because they had also invited Leni and Eva. His auntie, Leni, was excited, and they were excited about their Canadian friends coming. David had already agreed to take his aunt to pick up her friends at Heathrow on Boxing Day. He would pick them up on his way tomorrow. He was really looking forward to Christmas. Little Milton had appeared on time, and he was pondering that it was lovely to have two impending new children coming, Maisie and Anna's, their babies in the making. He was looking forward to meeting little Milton. His Aunt Leni must be 87 now, and there was some age gap. There was such a varied age range. He was smiling. He was particularly looking forward to meeting Leni's friends from Canada. He had a feeling they would be helpful with other parts of the list. He knew it almost by heart now, and when he talked to Melanie last time, a few weeks ago, he knew that her knowledge of the answers was extensive through Mio. They had not had the chance to meet all up again since the last gathering, and with little Milton now outside in the world, he wondered if her communication with Mio continued during this time. It made him feel almost ignorant with regards to his own body. It seemed to him Melanie received much information, least of all about herself. He started packing. He would need stuff over a week, and he thought that he would probably leave some clothes at Susan's, as they seemed to be constantly back and forth to their homes. The Big House. He liked that new name. The Refuge was dead. Long live the Big House. Chapter 71. Melanie and Uma. Melanie had been lying on her bed with Milton, talking to her Uma. It had been a year that she went over and had spent Christmas with her. Melanie kept in touch with her fairly regularly, and she was telling her all about the birth and the list, and the Canadian friends of Auntie Leni's who they had met on a cruise. Then Uma told her more about the amazing cruise she'd had. They laughed. Auntie Leni had also been on a Mediterranean cruise, but they would have never known each other. Anyhow, her Uma's cruise did not have a tarot reader on board. They were again marvelling that her grandma and Bliss had been friends for so many years and so long ago. 3 hours had passed and she put the phone down. Milton had been sleeping on the bed with her, and she was watching his quietly sleeping face, rising and falling belly, and she laid back to snooze. Talking to her Uma reminded her of last Christmas. She could hardly believe how much had changed. Mio had kept much in the background recently. It was as if things had got into motion, and she was allowed to get on with growing Milton. She had not only felt the shift in her own life, but in the world. There had been no dark nights, but her child was born on the 21st December 2012. That made him the last day of the sign of Sagittarius. She remembered that dark purple and dark blues are Sagittarian colours. It was a fire sign, optimistic and freedom-loving, good-humoured and honest. She'd had a friend at school, and they had both compared their star signs. Funny how she remembered it all. She would look back on her Parker's astrology. She'd had it for years, and she loved the way it explained so much about astrology. Little Milton looked so sweet and still. He was 3 days old now, and tonight people would arrive for the Heiligabend, the night before Christmas, with a buffet at the big house. She was smiling. She was up in the loft with Milton and felt far removed from the bustling downstairs. Her Omi had promised a visit in January. They agreed that she should aim to be here when the Canadian friends were visiting. She was most interested meeting them. She and Bliss had often drawn tarot cards. Neither of them were professionals, but she had already been interested in Auntie Leni and the reading she gave to David that last year. Uma liked to be kept in touch, and Melanie knew that she would be on to organising her journey to England before 2012 was over. She had to remember asking David to ascertain when they are back, when his friends are back from their wedding in Leicester. Milton was stirring, and she decided to get up and feed him. She made herself a note to ask the timing of Jenny and Ravi's visit, and she sat down to feed Milton, who was looking around the room, smiling at her, his little mouth starting to root for his milk. She relaxed to feed him and was glad no one had asked her to help prepare the feast downstairs. Tony had gone back to their flat yesterday morning to finish off, and he would be here tonight, with Pete, who had been up and down like a yo-yo to the south coast. Evelyn's loft was ready, and the remaining stuff would be done by others. She had been very happy with Pete's work, and they hoped they would finish most of the flat in Dorset before the new year would start. With baby Milton arrived now, they could move back in the beginning of January, hopefully. Christmas Day 2012. It was Christmas Day, and they had sat up quite late the night before. Everyone loved Christmas Eve. David had arrived with Auntie Leni and her friend Eva. Tony and Holly had arrived on the weekend already. It was Tuesday, and it had been 3 a.m. until the last of them had gone to bed the night before. Lydia loved it when so many people were around. Faye was happy that she was occupied with whoever she crawled to. Little Frida dog had settled into the big house like a second home, and was forever in and out into the garden. Tony had put a little flap at the back door, just big enough for Frida to go in and out at leisure. He had made sure to do the same at their home at the coast. He had managed to put a cat flap in the window, which led to a roof, where Pippa could find her way downstairs into the garden. Melanie was getting excited to get home, but was also very glad that she did not have to live there during the build. Holly and Susan were putting the finishing touches on the meal, which was scheduled to be ready early afternoon. Chris was sitting in the kitchen doing the crossword of yesterday's paper. He had taken Frida around the block already and was happy to be left to his puzzle. Faye was coming into the kitchen with Lydia on her arm. She was not involved in the cooking and was going to take Lydia for a walk. Auntie Leni and Eva were sitting in the conservatory talking with David. Leni had taken her new tarot set out again, and Chris could hear them analysing the spread. This was another thing he could not get his head around. There was much talk about the only planet of choice again last night. He had been the first to go to bed. He needed a bit of peace and quiet, away from Mio, the list, and his wife's writing, which had also come up again. When he heard that Holly had wondered if her beings from the planet Atlantis, which was a story in itself she had spun over 20 years, could be of the 24 civilizations which seeded Earth, he thought his head would explode. Had everybody lost their mind? And it seemed to him that when he was the only one who thought not only the question ludicrous, after all, it was only a story Holly had been spinning over the last 2 decades, but also the whole talk about the seeding of humanity that had gone right over his head. He tried to tune the talk of the hanged man and the pentacles out, and thankfully Susan had switched some Christmas music on. It was Frank Sinatra, and he thought at least that was somewhat bearable. Frida tried to jump onto his lap, and he put the pen down to pick her up. He couldn't concentrate on his crossword anyway. Holly put a half pint of ale in front of him. With Frida on his lap, he decided again that it could be so much worse. Pete, Ben and Tony came in from the garden. They had all only just got up, and seeing Chris with a glass in hand, the festivities and the day had started. Christmas was here, and it was Christmas Day. So, I finished this now. Oh wow, good timing. Bye bye.